Who would have thought that a man who hadn't smiled in 7 years, ever since the night his beloved wife died, would suddenly break into laughter because of a silly song sung by a poor secretary? Leonardo Reed never imagined his frozen heart could shift. Yet one careless tune drifting through his office corridors would become the spark that changed everything. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. The city knew him as a legend and a warning. The Reed Corporation Tower stood like an iron monument, and within its glass walls reigned a man made of stone. Leonardo Reed had built an empire, controlled half a dozen markets, and negotiated mergers worth billions. But for the employees who walked on eggshells each day, he was simply the CEO who never smiled. 7 years earlier, tragedy had carved him hollow. His wife, his partner, his balance, his light was killed in a sudden car accident. They said grief changes people. In Leonardo's case, it had turned him into marble. His face was always stern, his voice measured and cold, his posture rigid. Board members admired his discipline, but behind closed doors secretaries whispered, "He hasn't laughed once since she died." No one dared test it. A joke in the break room could cost you your job if overheard. Smiles died on lips when his footsteps echoed in the hallway. Even the janitor avoided whistling. Joy was banned where Leonardo walked. And then there was Clara. She wasn't supposed to be there long. Just a temporary secretary filling in for someone on maternity leave. 26 years old, with hair that never stayed in a neat bun and a habit of humming when she typed. She was the opposite of everything Reed's world demanded. The others rolled their eyes at her clumsy ways, but she carried a kind of chaos that was strangely warm. It happened late one Tuesday evening. Most of the building was empty, lights dimmed, the city outside buzzing with neon. Leonardo was working late as usual, scanning reports with the detached precision of a machine. Then, faintly, from the corridor, he heard it. A song. Off-key. Silly. Something about a cat running for president and mice forming a union. He frowned, at first convinced it was some cleaner's radio. But the words grew clearer, and soon he recognized a female voice. Bright, careless, not meant for anyone's ears but her own. He rose quietly, following the sound until he reached the small side office where Clara sat, legs tucked under her chair, tapping her pen like a drum. She was laughing at her own nonsense lyrics, trying to rhyme Constitution with revolution. Leonardo leaned in the doorway, unseen. And then, without warning, it happened. His lips curved. His chest shook. A sound he hadn't made in 7 years escaped him, low, rough, but undeniably real. He laughed. Clara froze midline, turning crimson when she saw him. "Oh no, you weren't supposed to hear that," she stammered, clutching the pen like a microphone. "I was just keeping myself awake." But Leonardo couldn't stop. The laughter startled him as much as her, like a dam breaking. For a few fleeting seconds, the weight of 7 years lifted. And when it settled back, he felt something foreign, something alive. He straightened, forcing his face back into stone. "Finish your reports before you leave," he muttered, retreating down the hall. Yet his pulse raced. He had smiled. He had laughed. He hadn't thought it possible. In her office, Clara whispered to herself, half in awe, half in mischief. So the man can laugh. Neither of them knew it yet, but that ridiculous little song would mark the end of an era. For Leonardo, the mask of cold silence had just cracked. And for Clara, who had no idea the power she'd unleashed, it was the beginning of a story neither of them could control. The next morning the tower looked the same. Steel, glass, silence. But Clara walked in with a spark in her eyes. She hadn't slept much. She kept replaying what she'd seen. The impossible had happened. The CEO, the man of stone, had laughed. Not just smirked or exhaled sharply, he had actually laughed like a human being. "Morning, Clara," one of the older secretaries whispered as they passed each other near the elevator. "Better keep your head down. Mr. Reed's reviewing contracts today. He's not in the mood." Clara smiled mischievously. "Not in the mood? We'll see about that." She slid behind her desk, stacked with reports, and began humming softly. Not her usual quiet tune, no, this time she chose something ridiculous. A marching rhythm. "Smile Patrol is on duty," she whispered under her breath, pen tapping like a snare drum. Leonardo emerged from his office an hour later, crisp suit, unreadable face, a folder in hand. He passed her desk, and just as he did, Clara fumbled her coffee cup, nearly spilling it on the reports. "Careful," he said curtly. "Oops, false alarm." "No national tragedy," she replied brightly, holding up the cup as if giving a press conference. "Citizens, we are safe. Coffee survived." A secretary across the hall gasped. "Joking with Reed? That was career suicide." But Leonardo paused, his hand tightening on the folder, his lips twitching, only for a moment, before he walked away without a word. Clara grinned. "Gotcha." That became the start of what she called Operation Smile. Every chance she had, she tested the edges of his icy mask. When the elevator doors nearly closed on her, she stuck her foot in and announced, "Breaking news. The Secretary of Clumsiness arrives." When she dropped a stack of papers, she bowed dramatically and declared, "Free confetti for everyone." Most employees thought she was insane. Some warned her quietly, "Don't push him. He'll fire you." But Clara saw the little cracks, the corner of his mouth twitching, the faintest lift of his brow. One evening, she tried something bolder. She noticed the manila folders stacked neatly on his desk through the half-open door. She knocked once, then stepped inside. "You're working too late again," she said, setting down a thermos. "Chamomile tea. Don't worry, it's not poisoned. I can't afford a lawsuit." Leonardo glanced up, eyebrow raised. "You should mind your own hours." "I did. Then I saw you still chained to your desk and thought, poor man, he'll fossilize here." She leaned on the doorway. "Do you know what the average fossil's favorite music is?" He blinked. "What?" "Rock." Silence. For 2 seconds, Clara regretted everything. Then, barely audible, a sound escaped him. Not a laugh this time, but a sharp exhale that was dangerously close. Her eyes widened. That was it, wasn't it? A laugh. "It was not," he said quickly, shutting the folder. "You're wasting your time." "Not wasting. Research. One day I'll publish a paper. How to melt a stone. The Reed experiment." Leonardo stared at her, speechless. No one ever spoke to him this way. Not board members, not investors, not even his family. And this young woman, with mismatched earrings and ink-stained fingers, dared to chip at his armor as if she didn't fear him at all. That night, when he returned home to his empty penthouse, her voice lingered. He poured himself a drink, but the silence felt heavier than usual. He found himself smiling faintly, not at memories of his wife, not at triumphs of business, but at the sheer audacity of a secretary who thought she could make him laugh. Meanwhile, Clara scribbled in her notebook like a detective. Day 2 of Operation Smile. Subject resisted but showed microreaction. Recommended strategy: increase puns. She chuckled to herself. He thinks I'll give up. We'll see. What neither of them knew was that this silly game would soon drag them into situations neither contracts nor strategies could control. A war was brewing outside their little experiment. Ruthless competitors, power-hungry directors. And when the storm came, that smile would mean everything. For now, though, Clara was content with her mission. She didn't need to save the company. She just needed to prove that laughter could return to a man who had buried it with his wife 7 years ago. And slowly, against his will, it was working. The following week began with the kind of tension that seeped into the walls. Everyone in the tower knew it. The Japanese delegation was arriving. If the deal succeeded, Reed Corporation would expand into Asia like never before. If it failed, millions could be lost. People whispered in hallways as if their words alone might tip the balance. Leonardo prepared as he always did, precision, control, zero margin for error. But that morning, fate decided to play a cruel trick. The interpreter, pale and trembling, rushed into the lobby only to collapse with a fever so high the paramedics had to carry him away. Panic swept through the staff. An entire negotiation without a translator? Impossible. Find a replacement, Leonardo ordered, his voice sharp as glass. Sir, it's too late. The delegation is already on their way upstairs. One of the managers stammered. A silence dropped heavy across the room. That was when Clara, clutching a tray of coffee she had volunteered to deliver, cleared her throat. I might know a little Japanese. Everyone turned to her like she had announced she could pilot a rocket ship. Leonardo's eyes narrowed. A little, she nodded, cheeks pink. Okay, more like 5 words and a karaoke song. But hey, desperate times, right? A horrified gasp rolled through the staff. This was Reed's empire. This was billions. And this girl was suggesting karaoke? But before Leonardo could dismiss her, the elevator doors opened, and the delegation stepped out. Suits immaculate, expressions unreadable. The meeting had begun. Inside the boardroom, Clara sat at the far end, notebook shaking in her hands. Leonardo introduced the team with his usual authority, but when the first executive spoke rapid Japanese, all eyes darted toward the empty chair where the interpreter should have been. Clara swallowed hard, then smiled nervously. He said, thank you for the warm welcome, and he hopes negotiations will be fruitful. The delegates nodded politely. Correct. She exhaled in relief. But the conversation grew faster, more technical, more dangerous. Clara's Japanese fell apart within minutes. She flailed, stumbling over words, mixing grammar. A few directors groaned under their breath. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of panicking, Clara leaned into what she knew best: humor. I apologize for my limited Japanese, she said directly to the delegates, bowing clumsily. But maybe numbers can speak louder than words. She grabbed a marker, dashed to the whiteboard, and began sketching. A graph. A funny little stick figure holding money bags. A cartoon cat shaking hands with a mouse. She exaggerated the visuals until the stern executives actually chuckled. And as she explained in broken phrases, she pointed at Leonardo, her voice full of conviction. This man, Reed-san, he is trustworthy, serious, but also, she drew a quick smiley face beside his name, human. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then one of the delegates laughed softly, responding in careful English. We like human, not only numbers. Relief swept across the table. The ice was broken. From there, Leonardo took control, guiding the negotiation with the precision he was known for, while Clara chimed in with her doodles and clumsy but warm phrases. Somehow, the odd combination worked. When the delegation finally stood, shaking hands firmly, the head investor smiled at Clara. You, he said slowly in accented English, very brave and funny. Clara flushed scarlet. Thank you. After they left, the directors buzzed, half in disbelief, half in awe. Against all odds, the deal had gone through. Leonardo closed the folder, his gaze fixed on Clara. She braced herself for dismissal, for a lecture, for icy anger. Instead, he said quietly, "You should have told me you were capable of improvisation." She blinked. "I'm not sure if drawing a cat in a business suit counts as capability." His lips twitched, the beginning of another smile. "It worked." She grinned, tilting her head. "Told you, Mr. Reed. Sometimes you just need a different language." Laughter's universal. For a long moment their eyes held, and for the first time in years, Leonardo felt something he had buried deep under contracts and grief. Trust. What no one realized was that this tiny victory would ripple far beyond the boardroom. Because in proving herself today, Clara had stepped into a spotlight she hadn't asked for. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was already planning how to use it against her. The invitation had read like a summons. Annual Reed Corporation Gala, attendance mandatory. For most employees, it was a chance to dress up, drink champagne, and glimpse the powerful figures who usually remained locked away in glass offices. For Clara, it was a nightmare waiting to happen. She stared at her reflection in the tiny mirror of her apartment. The dress she'd borrowed from a friend was one size too big, pinned at the waist with safety clips. Her shoes didn't match, and she had twisted her hair into a bun that refused to stay neat. But she had no choice. Attendance was required. "Just smile," she told herself. Or better yet, make someone else smile. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, white roses, and crystal glasses. Women floated in gowns worth more than Clara's yearly salary. Men wore tuxedos tailored to perfection. And there she was, clutching a thrift store clutch bag like a lifeline. At the center of it all, Leonardo Reed was the picture of authority. Tall, severe, immaculate in a black suit and silver tie. People gravitated toward him, like planets circling a star, though no one dared get too close. His aura demanded distance. Clara tried to keep to the edges, sipping sparkling water, when a sharp voice sliced through the music. Well, the famous secretary. It was Vanessa Cole, head of PR. A woman with a reputation as ruthless as her red lipstick. She had never hidden her disdain for Clara. Tonight, she didn't bother with subtlety. "You must be very proud," Vanessa drawled loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. After all, not everyone can trip over their own feet and insult investors in 2 languages. Quite the resume. Laughter rippled around the table. Clara's cheeks burned. She tried to smile, to brush it off, but Vanessa wasn't finished. "Honestly, who let you in? This is a gala, not a charity event." Clara opened her mouth, but the words stuck in her throat. Her heart pounded. All she could think was, "I don't belong here." And then a voice, calm, deep, authoritative, cut through the mockery. "She's here because I brought her." The crowd turned. Leonardo stood behind Clara, his expression unreadable, his gaze fixed on Vanessa. For a moment, Vanessa faltered. "Mr. Reed, I didn't mean." But Leonardo didn't let her finish. He placed a steady hand on Clara's shoulder, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Enough. If you must know, Clara is not only my secretary. She is also—" He paused, his eyes meeting Clara's, a storm of impulses colliding inside him. And then, to his own astonishment, he said the words, "My fiancée." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, flashes of phones as cameras lit up like fireworks. Clara nearly dropped her glass. "Wait, what?" she whispered. Leonardo's hand tightened slightly, anchoring her. Outwardly, his face was composed, but inside he could hardly believe himself. He had meant only to silence Vanessa, to protect Clara from humiliation. Instead, he had detonated a bomb. Reporters swarmed, guests whispered furiously, and Vanessa's smirk vanished, replaced by shock. Engaged? She repeated faintly. Leonardo nodded once, his expression unyielding. Yes, engaged. Clara's heart raced so fast she thought she might faint. She forced a smile, leaning closer to him so the cameras wouldn't catch her panic. You could have given me a little warning, she muttered through clenched teeth. He bent his head slightly, replying low enough for her ears only. Would you rather I let her destroy you? She blinked, stunned by the quiet intensity in his eyes. For a moment, all the noise of the ballroom faded. Flashbulbs continued to pop. Guests swarmed with congratulations, some skeptical, some envious. Clara found herself swept into a dance, Leonardo's hand steady on her back, guiding her across the floor as if they had done it 100 times. You do realize what you've started? She whispered as they moved. Yes, he said simply. And you expect me to what? Just play along. He met her gaze, and for the first time that evening, his lips curved in the faintest trace of a smile. You've been playing games with me since the day you walked into my office. Consider this my turn. Her breath caught. She wanted to protest, to tell him he was insane. But beneath the icy command in his voice there was something else. Something protective, almost tender. As the music swelled, Clara realized the truth. Whether she liked it or not, her life had just changed. She was no longer just the clumsy secretary with mismatched shoes. In the eyes of everyone watching, she was now Leonardo Reed's future wife. And though she told herself it was just a lie, a performance, a shield against humiliation, a dangerous part of her heart whispered that it might be something more. The headlines hit like an earthquake the very next morning. Reed, the untouchable CEO, engaged to his secretary. Corporate ice king melts at last. Cinderella in the boardroom. Clara nearly spilled her cereal when she saw her own startled face on the cover of a glossy magazine at the corner shop. The photo showed her and Leonardo on the ballroom floor, his hands steady at her waist, his eyes fixed on her like she was the only person in the room. It looked real, too real. She shoved the magazine back into the rack and muttered to herself, Relax, Clara. It's just fake. All fake. Remember. But fake didn't explain why her heart had nearly burst out of her chest when he touched her, or why she had replayed his faint smile in her mind 100 times since last night. Back at the office, chaos reigned. Paparazzi camped outside. Phones rang nonstop. Margaret, Leonardo's long-suffering assistant, stormed through the halls like a general at war. Clara, dear, you're trending worldwide. Do you realize what this means? Clara gulped. That I should run away and change my name? No, Margaret shoved a tablet in her hands. That the board is thrilled. Investors are suddenly convinced Leonardo Reed is a stable, relatable man, which means you're now his secret weapon. Secret weapon? More like sacrificial lamb. Before Clara could argue, Margaret added, He wants to see you. Now. Clara knocked on the heavy glass doors of his office, heart pounding. Leonardo looked up from a pile of documents, expression unreadable as always. Come in. She stepped inside, fidgeting with her bag strap. So, fiancé, huh? Quite the bomb you dropped. His lips twitched, but his eyes remained serious. It was necessary. Necessary? You made me the front-page freak show of New York. You were humiliated, he countered evenly. I wasn't going to allow it. She blinked. The blunt protectiveness in his tone disarmed her. So you thought fake engagement was the solution? He leaned back in his chair, hands clasped. It worked, didn't it? Clara groaned. Leonardo, pretending to be in love isn't a strategy. It's insane. His gaze locked on hers. Then consider it a temporary arrangement. We'll keep up appearances until the storm passes. After that, we end it." She opened her mouth to protest but stopped. Because deep down, she knew something he didn't. The storm wasn't going to pass. If anything, it was just beginning. That night, they were forced to attend a charity gala together. A show of stability, Margaret called it. Clara had half a mind to fake food poisoning. But when she walked out of her apartment building and saw Leonardo waiting by the car in a dark suit, her excuses died in her throat. "You clean up well," she said, trying to sound casual. "So do you," he replied softly, surprising her. The evening was a blur of flashing cameras and whispered questions. Leonardo kept her hand in his grip steady whenever the crowd pressed too close. Clara tried to laugh, to improvise, to keep her balance, but somewhere between champagne toasts and polite smiles, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't pretending anymore. Later, in the car, silence stretched between them. The city lights flickered across his face, highlighting the sharp lines, the hidden weariness in his eyes. Clara wanted to ask about the shadows that seemed to follow him, about the smile he hadn't worn in 7 years. Instead, what slipped out was, "Why me?" He turned. "What do you mean? You could have picked anyone. Why drag me into this circus?" His answer came quietly, almost reluctant. "Because when you're in the room, I forget how heavy it all feels." Her breath caught. For once, the walls around him cracked, and she glimpsed the man beneath, the one who had lost his wife, who had buried his smile for years. Neither of them said another word as the car pulled up to his penthouse. But when he walked her to the door, neither of them moved to say goodnight. Clara swallowed. "This is crazy." "Completely," Leonardo agreed. And then, like two people pushed by gravity they couldn't resist, they kissed. It wasn't polite or staged for cameras. It was raw, real, and full of everything they hadn't said. The night didn't end at the door. For the first time in 7 years, Leonardo let someone into his private world. Not just his home, but his guarded heart. And for the first time in her life, Clara felt what it was like to be truly wanted. Not as a joke, not as a charity case, but as herself. By morning, the world outside still thought they were faking it. But inside, between tangled sheets and unspoken promises, Clara knew the truth. Whatever had begun as a lie was slowly, dangerously, becoming real. If love had begun to bloom in secret, it didn't stay hidden for long. By the end of the week, tabloids were ravenous. Photographers followed Clara everywhere, down subway steps, outside her tiny apartment, even into the corner cafe where she bought cheap croissants for breakfast. She tried to laugh it off. "Guess I'm famous now," she told her friend over the phone. But beneath the humor, anxiety gnawed at her. Fame wasn't made for people like her. She was a secretary with overdue rent and mismatched socks, not the future Mrs. Reed. And someone else knew it too. Someone determined to remind the world she didn't belong. Vanessa Cole, head of PR, was everything Clara wasn't. Sleek, ruthless, and burning with ambition. She had spent years circling Leonardo, hoping to become the woman at his side. Not because of love, but because of power. Clara's sudden rise from nowhere threatened to ruin all of that. And Vanessa was not about to let a girl with clumsy charm steal her spotlight. The trap was simple but devastating. Emails, screenshots, edited photos, all carefully crafted to suggest that Clara had been bragging to friends about trapping the boss and using him for his fortune. One morning, the story exploded online. Secretary scam. Reed's fiancé exposed as gold digger? Clara sat frozen at her desk, staring at the article. Fake messages she had never written glared back at her. "Once I marry him, I'll never have to work again. Can you believe how easy it was?" Her stomach twisted. Her phone buzzed nonstop with reporters demanding answers. Colleagues whispered behind her back, some staring openly, others shaking their heads. Margaret stormed in, face pale. "Clara, don't say a word. Damage control is in motion." But the damage was already done. Leonardo appeared minutes later, flanked by board members, his face carved from stone. The directors were in uproar. "This is a disaster, Reed. Investors are calling. Shares are dropping. You need to end this charade immediately." Clara looked at him, pleading silently. "Tell them it's not true. Defend me." But Leonardo didn't speak. His jaw clenched, his eyes unreadable. He didn't deny the lies. He didn't shield her. He simply stood there, paralyzed between his heart and his empire. The silence crushed her more than words ever could. When the meeting ended, she packed her bag with trembling hands. Leonardo entered the office, closing the door behind him. "Clara, don't," she whispered, not looking at him. His voice was rough. "I just need time to." "To what?" She finally turned, tears burning her eyes. "Decide whether I'm worth your empire? Decide if I'm worth more than numbers on a screen." He flinched but said nothing. That was enough. She lifted her chin, forcing steadiness into her breaking voice. "You don't have to decide. I already have. Goodbye, Leonardo." And with that, she walked out of Reed Tower. Past flashing cameras, past whispers, past the man who had made her believe in miracles. Leaving behind not only the job and the lie of an engagement, but also the fragile, dangerous love that had just begun to take root. That night, alone in her apartment, Clara curled on her bed with the pregnancy test trembling in her hands. 2 lines. Positive. She pressed a palm to her stomach, tears spilling freely. "It's just us now," she whispered. She had no idea that inside the glass tower, Leonardo stood by his office window, staring at the city lights, his heart a battlefield of regret. He replayed her voice over and over. "Decide if I'm worth more than numbers on a screen." And for the first time in 7 years, he wasn't afraid of grief. He was afraid of losing her. But by the time he gathered the courage to move, Clara was gone. Clara left the glittering skyscrapers behind and returned to the quieter corners of the city. The kind where the sidewalks were cracked, the schools underfunded, and the people carried more hope than money. It wasn't glamorous, but it was familiar. Here, no one cared about magazines or hashtags. Here, she was just Clara again. She found work as a part-time aide in a local elementary school, helping children with reading and art projects. It wasn't much, but it paid enough for groceries and bus fare. And more than that, it gave her a sense of purpose. Each time a child laughed at one of her silly rhymes, she felt a little of the emptiness inside her lighten. But at night, when she closed her eyes, Leonardo's face returned. His silence, the way he had looked at her in that boardroom. Stone-faced, torn but silent. She told herself she hated him, that she was done. Yet in the quiet hours, her hand always drifted to her stomach, where the truth was growing stronger every day. 2 lives. Their lives. Clara hadn't told a soul, not even her closest friend. She wore loose sweaters, carried oversized bags, and smiled when people teased her about eating for 2. Inside, though, she was terrified. Terrified of the future, of raising children alone, of one day having to explain to them who their father was, and why he hadn't been there. One afternoon, while helping the children paint cardboard masks for a school play, Clara paused as a little boy tugged on her sleeve. "Miss Clara, why are you sad?" She forced a smile. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just tired." But the boy tilted his head wisely. "My mom says tired smiles are the saddest kind." The words hit her harder than they should have. She excused herself, stepping into the hallway, pressing a hand against the wall as her eyes filled. Tired smiles, the saddest kind. That night, she wrote in her notebook, a habit she had picked up to calm her thoughts. Day 1, week 10. Babies are the size of strawberries. Still unreal. Still a secret. Day 14, week 12. Dreamt of him again. I hate that I still miss him. Day 30, week 14. Felt the first flutter. Tiny but real. Like they're reminding me I'm not alone. She would close the notebook quickly whenever anyone knocked, terrified someone would read her heart on the pages. Meanwhile, whispers about her still lingered online. Vanessa's smear campaign had left scars. Articles painted Clara as a manipulator who had seduced her boss. None of those strangers knew the truth, that she was carrying his children, that her heart still broke at the sound of his name. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Clara sat on her small balcony with a cup of tea, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly. The city lights twinkled in the distance, far away from the tower where Leonardo still lived. I don't need him, she whispered aloud. We'll be fine, just us three. But her voice cracked on the last word, because deep down, she knew she wasn't just angry. She was grieving the man who had made her laugh until her sides hurt, who had kissed her like the world might end, who had finally let her see the cracks in his armor. Grieving the chance at a family that had slipped through her fingers before it even began. And though she promised herself she would never forgive him, every beat of her heart betrayed her, because forgiveness was already quietly growing inside her, along with the two lives that tied her to him forever. The Reed Tower was quieter than usual, though the silence carried an edge sharper than glass. Leonardo's footsteps echoed through the corridors like a judge's gavel. Weeks had passed since Clara walked out, but her absence still haunted every room. Her desk was empty, her humming gone. Even her scattered sticky notes, little doodles of cats and crooked smiles, had been cleared away. He had thought burying himself in work would help. Numbers, contracts, acquisitions, things he could control. But nothing filled the hollow space she had left. For the first time in years, Leonardo realized he wasn't afraid of silence anymore. He hated it. Then Margaret entered his office one evening, lips pressed tight. You should see this. She laid a file on his desk. Inside were printouts, metadata, digital traces, all pointing to one conclusion. The so-called emails Clara had written were forgeries. Every timestamp mismatched. Every screenshot manipulated. And the IP address? It led directly back to Vanessa Cole. Leonardo's jaw tightened, fury burning through his veins. She destroyed Clara's reputation. She destroyed. He stopped, voice breaking. Us. Margaret's eyes softened. It's not too late, but you need to act. The next morning, Leonardo did something he hadn't done in years. He skipped the boardroom. Instead, he marched straight into the PR department, flanked by 2 IT specialists and a lawyer. Vanessa looked up from her desk, startled. Mr. Reed. What a... Save it, he snapped, slamming the file onto her polished surface. I know what you did. Her face drained of color, then quickly recovered into a sneer. Those files could mean anything. She was never right for this company. For you. His voice cut through like ice. And you thought you were? By destroying her? By destroying me? The room stilled. Employees froze at their desks, watching as Vanessa's composure cracked. You're finished here, Leonardo said coldly. Effective immediately. Security escorted her out, but victory felt hollow. Because even with Vanessa gone, the damage remained. Clara was still gone. That night, alone in his penthouse, Leonardo poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared at the skyline. Memories flooded back. The sound of Clara's laugh, the warmth of her hand in his, the night she whispered against his lips, "This is crazy." And then, like lightning, a thought struck him. What if she still believed the lies? What if she thought he hadn't cared enough to fight for her? The next morning, Leonardo called a press conference. Cameras flashed wildly as he stepped onto the stage, but his face was steady. For once, he wasn't speaking as a CEO. He was speaking as a man. "There have been rumors regarding Clara Hayes," he began, his deep voice resonating through the hall. "Lies, manipulations. She was accused of things she never did, words she never spoke. And I—" His voice caught, but he forced himself forward. "I failed her. I didn't protect her when I should have. For that, I will regret it for the rest of my life." Gasps rippled through the room. Leonardo Reed, the unshakable titan of business, admitting regret? He lifted the file in his hand. "Today, I present evidence that proves Clara was framed by someone within this very company. That person has been removed, and legal action is underway. But clearing her name is not enough. Because the truth is, for the first time in 7 years, his mask cracked in front of the world. His eyes glistened, his voice trembled. The truth is, Clara is the only reason I remembered how to smile again. And I love her. Whether she forgives me or not, the world deserves to know. She is not a fraud. She is my heart." The cameras erupted. Reporters shouted questions. But Leonardo didn't stay to answer. He had said what mattered. Now all that remained was whether Clara had heard. And across the city, in a modest school classroom, Clara froze as the live stream played on a colleague's phone. Her hand instinctively went to her belly, where 2 tiny lives stirred within her. Her eyes filled as Leonardo's words echoed. "She is my heart." For the first time in weeks, hope broke through the grief. But hope was dangerous. Hope could destroy her all over again. She turned away from the screen, whispering to her unborn children, "Don't believe it. We don't need him." Yet deep inside, her heart betrayed her, because it was already starting to believe. The press conference had set the city on fire. Clips of Leonardo's trembling voice declaring his love went viral within hours. For once, the world didn't see a ruthless CEO. They saw a man stripped bare, a man begging for forgiveness. But Clara didn't know what to do with it. She carried her secret close, hand resting over the growing curve of her stomach, torn between the memory of his silence and the ache of his confession. Could words erase the moment he had stood still while the world tore her apart? The answer, she decided, was no. Words weren't enough. So she kept going, grading school projects, reading bedtime stories to children after class, humming lullabies to her unborn twins. And though she tried to ignore the headlines, her heart betrayed her every time his name appeared. Then came the school fundraiser, a modest affair in the gymnasium, filled with cardboard decorations, folding chairs, and children in paper masks. Clara had helped organize it, and she told herself she was too busy to think about Leonardo. But when the doors opened, and the crowd buzzed louder than usual, she looked up, and her world tilted, because standing there, absurd and impossible, was a giant panda. At first, she thought it was just another costume for the kids' play. But when the panda waved awkwardly, then shuffled onto the stage with a microphone in hand, Clara's heart stopped. The panda began to sing, not a polished ballad, not a love song from the radio, but her song, the ridiculous tune she had once sung about the cat running for president. His deep voice muffled through the costume, stumbling over the silly lyrics, off-key and clumsy. The children roared with laughter. Teachers clapped. Parents smiled in confusion. And Clara pressed a hand to her mouth as tears spilled freely. Because only one man in the world would dare stand in front of hundreds of people, in a panda suit, singing her nonsense song. When the laughter quieted, the panda set down the microphone and pulled off the oversized head. Leonardo stood revealed, flushed, awkward, yet utterly determined. His hair was mussed, his suit wrinkled beneath the costume, but his eyes were fixed only on her. He stepped forward, his voice carrying across the gym. 7 years ago, I buried my smile with my wife. I thought joy was gone from my life forever. Then you walked into my office and sang about a cat president. The room chuckled softly. Clara trembled. Leonardo continued, his voice breaking. You made me laugh, Clara. You made me live again. And I was a fool not to protect you when you needed me most. But I am done being a coward. So here I am in the only way you'd believe me. Not with money, not with power, but with laughter. He dropped to one knee. Gasps filled the gym. The children squealed, tugging on each other's sleeves. He's proposing. Leonardo pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a ring that glittered under the fluorescent lights. Not extravagant, not overwhelming, simple, elegant, chosen with care. Clara Hayes, he said, his voice trembling but clear. Will you marry me? Not for the cameras, not for the company, but for us. For the family I still dream we can be. Clara's chest ached. Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to scream yes, to throw herself into his arms. But then she thought of the silence, of the humiliation, of the babies growing inside her who deserved certainty, not just a grand gesture. She shook her head slowly, voice breaking. Leonardo, you don't know everything. He froze, the ring still in his hand. I'm pregnant, she whispered. The gym seemed to vanish, the noise fading until it was only the two of them. Twins. Yours. His breath caught. The world around him blurred as tears filled his eyes. Real, unrestrained tears. He rose to his feet, reaching for her hand but stopping inches away, as if afraid she'd pull back. You carried this alone? His voice cracked. Clara, She shook her head, her tears falling freely. I didn't tell you because you didn't fight for me. I couldn't risk them being hurt the way I was. The silence that followed was heavier than any boardroom Leonardo had ever faced. But this time he didn't falter. He placed the ring box gently on the table beside her, then sank to both knees, not just one, as if surrendering everything. His voice shook, but his gaze held steady. Then let me fight now. For you. For them. For us. I don't care how long it takes, Clara. I'll prove it every day if I have to. The children clapped. The parents whispered. The world around them watched. But all Clara saw was the man kneeling before her, stripped of pride, begging not for forgiveness, but for a chance. Her heart screamed yes, but her lips trembled on the edge of an answer, knowing the choice she made now would decide everything. The gym buzzed with restless anticipation. Parents shifted in their folding chairs. Children bounced with excitement. Teachers exchanged glances. But in the middle of it all, Clara and Leonardo stood frozen, as if time itself had stopped. He was still on his knees, eyes glistening, voice raw. I'll prove it, Clara. Every day. Just let me. Her heart twisted. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to sink into his arms and let the past wash away. But wounds didn't heal in a single gesture, no matter how grand. She had learned that the hard way. Clara's hand drifted to her stomach. 2 lives fluttered inside her, fragile and new. She looked at Leonardo, at the man who had once stayed silent when the world turned against her, and at the man now kneeling in front of her in a panda costume, stripped of pride, desperate to win her back. Stand up, she whispered. He rose slowly, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Clara took a shaky breath. I don't want promises, Leonardo. I don't want headlines or speeches. I want actions. I want to know that when the storm comes, and it always does, you'll stand beside me. Not silent, not torn, just there. Leonardo's throat worked as he swallowed hard. Then that's what I'll give you. Not just words tonight, but every choice from this moment on. No empire, no contract, no reputation will ever matter more than you and our children. The gym fell silent, every pair of eyes locked on them. And for the first time since the day she left the tower, Clara believed him. Not because of the ring, not because of the panda suit, but because he was trembling. Because the man who had once seemed carved from stone was now flesh and blood, vulnerable and afraid of losing her. A tear slipped down her cheek. She smiled through it. Then yes, Leonardo, I'll marry you. The room erupted. Children squealed, parents clapped, teachers cheered. But Leonardo heard none of it. He heard only the word yes. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if the world could vanish and it wouldn't matter. Later, as the evening wound down, Clara sat on the stage while Leonardo knelt beside her, his hand resting gently over her stomach. She had whispered the truth into his ear. They're twins. His eyes had widened, then softened with tears he didn't bother to hide. Two, he asked hoarsely. Two, she confirmed, her smile trembling. He bent his head, pressing his forehead against her belly, whispering words she couldn't fully hear. Apologies, promises, love. When he looked up, his face was transformed. For the first time in 7 years, his smile wasn't forced, wasn't fleeting. It was real. Months later, the park where they first laughed together became the setting of their wedding. Not a ballroom, not a skyscraper, just a simple ceremony beneath blooming cherry blossoms. Clara wore a dress that wasn't designer but felt perfect. Leonardo wore a suit without a tie, his smile brighter than any diamond. Margaret cried in the front row. The children from Clara's school sang her silly cat president song as a choir, making everyone laugh through their tears. And when the vows were spoken, Leonardo's voice carried steady and sure. I vow to never let silence steal from us again. I vow to laugh with you every day, even when it hurts. And I vow to love you and the family we've made more than I ever thought I could. When the twins were born, the promise was already alive. Leonardo was there through every contraction, every tear, holding Clara's hand, whispering, "You're not alone. Not anymore." 2 tiny cries filled the hospital room, and Clara wept with joy as Leonardo kissed each baby's forehead. "Welcome home," he whispered to them, then to Clara. "Welcome me home." In the months that followed, their apartment filled with noise. Late-night feedings, diaper changes, Clara's silly songs, Leonardo's surprisingly good lullabies. The man who had once buried his smile now laughed daily, loudly, shamelessly. One evening, as the 4 of them sat curled together, Clara with one twin in her arms, Leonardo rocking the other, Clara teased, "Remember when you said you'd never laugh again?" Leonardo looked at her, his smile gentle, his eyes glowing. "That was before you." And when the twins gurgled in perfect harmony, the room erupted with laughter. The kind that heals, the kind that lasts. 7 years of silence ended with a song about a cat president. But what followed was a lifetime of love, chaos, and laughter. Proof that sometimes the silliest beginnings lead to the most extraordinary endings.